Welcome to Live with the League. I'm Emily Kalashewski, Assistant Director of Member Experience and Learning here at the League. We have got a great show lined up for you today. Here's what we'll be covering. First, Taylor Pine, digital media developer here at the League, joins us to share details on our marketing and communications team's recent trip to the Upper Peninsula. We've got a budget update from our state and federal affairs team, John Lamacchia and Dave Hodgkins, plus updates on the postmark property tax bill and oath of office deadlines. And then a couple of league reminders on upcoming events for newly elected officials, our new online learning platform, and more. As always, if you're watching live, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box, and we'll answer as many as we can throughout the show. Let's get started. We're kicking things off first with a trip up north. Earlier this month, members of our marketing and communications team, including our guest today, Taylor Pine, our digital media developer, traveled to Michigan's beautiful Upper Peninsula to visit several League member communities. Taylor, welcome. Really excited to have you here today. You and the team covered a lot of ground on this trip. Can you start by sharing where you went and who you met with along the way?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me, Emily. We really just had a great trip overall. I'm super excited to share, and frankly, I'm honestly really impressed with how much we were able to see over the course of only a few days. So, well, first and foremost, I just wanted to say thank you to all of the local leaders from Escanaba, Negaunee, Marquette, and Munising who were able to meet with us over the course of the few days we were up in the UP. It was really just amazing meeting all of them and seeing all the beauty that their towns have to offer. There's not really anything that beats fall in the UP. So we
Amazing.
started, yes, of course. So we started off, three of us headed out from Ann Arbor really, really bright and early. So that was myself, our marketing manager, Ariel Ryan, and then our content writer, Emily Landau-Pinswan. We made it to the bridge right around lunchtime, which was really perfect. It was also Emily's first time going across the bridge, so that was a really special thing to experience together. But yes, we stopped and we had lunch at the Wild Blueberry Cafe in St. Ignace, which is just a super charming town. Really enjoyed that. And then from there, we headed over to Escanaba to meet with city manager Jim McNeil. So we met at the city hall, which also houses the local library. And as a bookworm myself, I very much appreciated that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and while we were there with him, we discussed the Lafayette Street development. So it is their version of their downtown development project, and they are able to declare themselves as the longest small town downtown in Michigan, which is super fun and exciting. Their downtown actually spans 23 blocks. So it's a very big undertaking and a really exciting project.
Mhm.
Yeah, so after that, we went to Negaunee and we were able to meet with two different people from Negaunee, one of them being architect Ryan Morse and then also city manager Nate Heffron. We started off the day at Midtown Bakery and Cafe, and that was with Ryan, who is a transplant to Negaunee. So it was really insightful hearing from him and his move from Alaska, of all places, to Negaunee.
Okay.
That was a very, yes, it was a very fascinating conversation, which we very much enjoyed. And then after that, we headed over to City Hall and we were able to meet with Nate Heffron, the city manager, and he gave us the grand tour of Nagaunee's downtown, which was just recently recognized as our Community Excellence Award winner for 2025. There
Yeah.
was so much going on there. It was super exciting to see everything. And Nate very obviously plays an extremely active role in his community as city
Mhm.
manager, which bode really well for us because we were able to connect with different local business owners as well. So we were able to talk with people from the Love and Bicycles bike shop, the Italian restaurant Stregonona, and then also the owner from Campfire Coffee. And that was really special to hear from a business owner perspective what all of these developments in the downtown were doing for them specifically.
Sure.
Yeah, and then after Negaunee, we headed over to Marquette, a quick 15-minute commute. So we met with city manager and MML board member Karen Kovacs, and then the deputy city manager Sean Hoppins. They were super friendly and told us about all of the amazing things that they have going on in their town. And it was just very insightful listening to them and hearing them talk about all of their developments from adaptive reuse to their construction of a new band shell on their Presque Isle Park, we were
Mhm.
able to actually go and explore that ourselves. We did the hike, we visited Black Rocks and saw the new band shell construction, which was very exciting. And then just generally, we really enjoyed walking and exploring the downtown area, which is full of brand new murals and a lot of really charming local businesses. So that was a very fun time as well. Then we rounded out the trip in Munising. We were able to talk with City Clerk Sue Roberts and interim city manager Ray Anderson. Their city hall is actually a log cabin, so that was very
Okay.
fun. We really experienced a lot of interesting and unique city halls along the way, so that was special. And I really enjoyed seeing what their DDA has been up to in Munising. They have an art installation that they call Art in the Alley.
Hmm.
So that was an outdoor art gallery which featured dozens of art pieces from local artists, and there were a lot of murals around the town as well. So that was really amazing to see. While we were there, we talked about a bunch of things related to downtown development, but also housing and brownfield projects. So yeah, those were our
Amazing.
stops, and it was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Well, it sounds like an incredible trip. I was just up there recently as well, for the UP Manager Summit. So I spent some time in the UP, and you had a chance to talk with members, just like I did, about everything from downtown redevelopment and housing to, new developments, creative brownfield projects. What stood out most to you as you heard about different local priorities in these communities?
I would just say that what really stood out to me is that the leadership in these cities are extremely committed to making their cities better places to live. So I think that energy is palpable, it's very strong, and it's very inspiring. So I would say that for me is the top thing that I noticed. And across the different towns that we visited, the local leaders were really creative, but they were also very determined to maintain their own unique community character, which I very much appreciated.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and that,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead. Let's
I,
hear it.
I was just, no, I was just going to touch on what you mentioned earlier, which were the brownfield grants. And I think that among the colleagues and I that went, we kind of discussed how it was interesting because in our minds, brownfield grants were kind of something where you can only utilize it if you have this extremely polluted land, which we realize after talking to a lot of these communities, that's not entirely the case. So it was really exciting to talk with, especially Sue and Ray and Munising. They explained that there's a much wider use for brownfield grants. So I would just really encourage other communities who are listening to investigate this funding method if they haven't yet. And then I did want to take a minute to talk about some of the exciting adaptive reuse projects that are happening as well.
Yeah,
Because,
let's hear it. We love adaptive
yeah,
reuse.
yeah, well, I grew up in Bay City, so very much surrounded by historic homes. And it just brings me a lot of joy to see other communities revitalizing historic buildings in their towns. So, in all of the cities we visited, there were some exciting projects, but I wanted to shout out specifically Marquette. They recently completed a conversion of a former orphanage, of all things, into the Grandview Apartments. So, a lot of units
Hmm.
of housing for them. And then in Escanaba as well, they are in development of the Lake Effect Distillery, which is something I will certainly be visiting myself when it's completed. But very exciting, and that's a conversion from their old National Bank building. So overall, lots of really awesome projects going on in the UP.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know all of us here that work at the League really value getting out into member communities and telling their stories. Why is that firsthand connection important to how we share the League's work statewide?
I mean, I would just say that at the league, our job is to support our communities and to amplify their voices. And speaking from my work specifically, I admire so many of the projects that are happening across the state, but I can't necessarily speak to the ins and outs of every program, but that's where the leaders and the people with boots on the ground in these communities certainly can. So I just think they have some very valuable knowledge and perspective on community development. And I would say that it's important for us to stay connected with these communities that are actually doing the work and just to have their expertise inform our advocacy and programming.
Sure. And finally, if somebody is hearing about these projects or initiatives and is thinking immediately of their own that they've got that is either similar or different, but interesting and creative in their own way, in their own community, what's the best way for them to connect with you or our team to share the story?
Yeah, I would say that we're always looking for opportunities to brag about our members and the amazing work that they're
Yeah.
doing. So, from the blog to social media, there's a lot of channels for us to get those projects out there. And anyone who has a project that they're proud of, please, please, please reach out. You can reach out to me via email, and I can drop my email in the chat for anyone who's interested.
Amazing. Well, I love hearing all about your visits, what you've learned. It's always inspiring to see what our members are doing in every corner of the state. So thanks for sharing a glimpse of that, Taylor. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily.
Absolutely. Now it's time. Let's turn over to our state and federal affairs update. Joining us, we've got John Lamacchia and Dave Hodgkins. We're going to dive right into it. John, let's start with a quick look at the budget. Budget's officially signed and in place when we're talking about the state budget, of course. We've covered the big takeaways around revenue sharing and road funding on our last few shows, and of course, across the blog. But is there anything new or noteworthy for our members to keep an eye on now that implementation is, I'll say, underway?
Yeah. One, don't ask me about the federal government budget. I have.
Great.
Um,
No updates.
and two, for some of you that may have noticed and even sent a text message or two about the fact that we might not have been paying attention to Taylor talking, that is because my head was down because in real time, I just posted a blog. I was
Mm,
hoping to have that up before, but best laid plans sometimes don't come to fruition. And the reason is there's a couple of links in that blog to revenue projections from both MDOT and Treasury as it relates to road funding and revenue sharing specifically. And the revenue sharing links were not working this morning. So
mm,
at about 11:55, they started working. And so I was able to quickly get those embedded and posted to a blog. So some of you will see in your inbox a new Inside 208 blog that Betsy is posting right here. Thanks, Betsy. Um, and so I'm going to walk people through this a little bit because I think these are some of the things that people have been most interested about. And I will also let you know that we don't have all of the answers yet. And some
right.
of those are still coming, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So what you see in the blog is really twofold here. One, roads, and two, revenue sharing. I'll start with roads, so everybody knows that. If you click on that link, it will take you to a document that will project your revenue for fiscal year 26, which is the fiscal year that we just entered, and fiscal year 27, which is next year. Now, we need to remember that road funding in that package is actually a 5-year phase in, but years 3 through 5 are relatively difficult to project. And those projections, in terms of differences, are going to be minor in the sense of revenue increases because it is only going up by about $88 million a year, give or take, in terms of how inflation and things like that would work on gas tax collection. So the best projections that MDOT can provide right now are in fiscal year 26 and 27. Still very much estimates because when we think about how this actually plays out in real time, these are not yet actual collections that they're basing this off of. So gas tax, fuel taxes, we think both sale on regular diesel and others, registration fees, and now the new wholesale marijuana tax is always going to be very much in flux. And so as those things come in, data lags, payments lag, things like that. But when you look at that document, there are two things that I want to point out to make sure that
Mhm.
there's no confusion. First of all, the two major columns you should pay attention to are the ones that say FY26 total and FY27 total. You will see a column in there that looks like it's a reduction in revenue as it relates to income tax. While it looks like a negative, on this particular sheet, it is not a loss of revenue. From a policy standpoint, what they did is there was $600 million in income tax immediately dedicated towards roads. They are no longer taking that off of the general income tax box. Instead, they're attributing it to the corporate income tax component of this and then dispersing it in that method. And so it's no change in revenue, it's just a change in the source of which it's coming out of. Now, interestingly enough, though, and this is where we're still trying to get some answers from the department. And quite frankly, I don't want to say it's that they don't know because it's not that simple. It's trying to make sure that we get this accurate. when we think about the monthly payments that will be dispersed, you may see, and I make note of this, that your initial payments in the fiscal year might be slightly smaller. And then as we move to the end of the state fiscal year, you may see a couple of larger lump sum style payments. The reason for that is the corporate income tax that's being dispersed to roads now gets paid out in three segments, and not all to roads. So they have a prioritization within the law that says the first $1.2 billion needs to go to the general fund, the next $50 million to the Housing and Community Development Fund, and then $688 million to roads. Now, the issue becomes they actually have to collect that money first. So not all 1.8-ish billion dollars comes into the corporate income tax on day one. And so the fact that they have to get through a little over $1.2 billion in collection before they can get to that roads component will delay those payments. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just in terms of
Sure.
actually hit your budget. So as you think about that from your own budgetary standpoint, you'll have to just understand that the typical cadence that we are used to in receiving Act 51 disbursements into our communities to pay for our road infrastructure may be slightly different as a result of the passage of this new package. As we get more confirmation on that and we have more detailed guidance from the department, we'll be sure to post that and make sure people are aware. But that is kind of where we're at right now on the road side. Revenue share.
Can I
Go ahead.
can I follow up with a question on this? We just got one in the chat. To clarify, these funds will also be separated between local and major streets.
Yeah, that is a typical question that we get within it. The
Yeah.
disbursement as it relates to the Act 51 funding model, right? So the formula by which we distribute money to cities, villages, and counties will continue to be followed, and that allocation will be based on the number or miles of major streets you have versus the miles of local streets that you have. Several years ago, though, we did make a change. And for those of you that have adopted an asset management plan, which I'm guessing is most, if not all of you, um, as long as you've done that and submitted that to the Transportation Asset Management Council, you have flexibility to move that money back and forth between your major and local network as your asset management fund or as your asset management plan would dictate. So that's an important question to ask, and it's an important one to think about. But disbursement based on your number of miles will remain the same with this new revenue.
Thanks, John. Okay, moving on from roads. What's next?
Yeah, revenue sharing.
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about, sort of the reduction in constitutional, how that plays against statutory and the inclusion of public safety. And there have been several different estimates out there, and they were very early in terms of their projections. We have warned our members to sort of utilize that as the guide, but really once Treasury comes out with their data, that's the best one to pay attention to. No, not to disparage House or Senate fiscal agencies. I just think when we think about who actually is responsible for this at the end of the day, the department being really the definitive arbiter of this information. But once again, I have to remind everybody that these are estimates, particularly on the constitutional side. And that is because it's based on actual sales tax collection. We don't know that, obviously, as of right now, and that will fluctuate at varying points within the year. So what you will see included in the blog is two links. The first link is a side-by-side comparison to your actual fiscal year 25 compared to your estimated fiscal year 26. That is the one where you will see kind of that laid out and recognizing the reduction and the impact as it relates to constitutional overlaid with statutory. And then if you want to get a little bit more granular, and this is really the data set that we were waiting on, was Treasury updated on Friday, is your bi-monthly projections. And so when you click on that second link, you can actually go to Treasury's website, find the county that your municipality resides within, click that county from the drop-down box, and then it'll pull up a second drop-down box where you can find your individual community, and that will lay out your constitutional and statutory payments over the course of the year, the state's fiscal year, I should say. It doesn't always align with your fiscal year, but the state's fiscal year, and how each of those bi-monthly payments are estimated to translate out for your community. The one piece of missing data right now is the public safety revenue sharing pot. We have previously put out some House fiscal estimates on that. They are very, very preliminary. And I think part of the reason right now Treasury is hesitant to put those out is making sure that they are using the most recent Michigan State Police crime data, which we believe is going to be slightly different than what House Fiscal has used. Not because the data is wrong, they're just using a different 3-year segment in which to do and estimate that wasn't available just yet when House Fiscal put out their information. So that is the latest that we have from Treasury, and MDOT should provide you the best estimates to date, but understand that they will fluctuate. And as we get additional information, we'll be sure to put that out there.
Thanks, John. Let's move on to another topic that's been getting attention lately, which is the postmark property tax bill. Can you walk us through what this proposal does and why it matters?
Yeah, this one has been interesting. It's a carryover from a piece of legislation from last year. And if we all think about how we collect property taxes, there's a due date, right? And those property taxes need to be in by that due date. It allows us to reconcile that roll and then share that with the county so we understand what's delinquent. There is a proposed change, and as introduced, that proposed change would have said that the postmark date on the property tax bill that was submitted to the municipality would be considered valid and then meeting that due date if it was done by the due date that is in law. The interesting thing is I've come to learn about this. It's just not that simple. Setting aside the fact that it makes us very reliant on the U.S. Postal Service. I'm not going to comment on the reliability of it, but we do know that things happen. Second to that is, sometimes the postmark is not legible, sometimes not existent. And so what do we do to reconcile those issues? And then there's a lot of other things as it relates to electronic payments, some of which come in without postmarks. And so, it's been a great learning experience, quite frankly, to understand all the different ways in which communities have to accept and do accept property tax payments. I will say we have had excellent engagement from our members on this particular topic. They did make some changes to the bill as it was moving through committee last week, which it did. Those changes allow for some, clearer definitions around electronic payments, some clearer identification of when a postmark would and wouldn't be accepted based on days out from that due date, which is now set at 5. But we also testified, or at least one of our members testified in opposition. We also submitted a card in opposition, even still to that most recent version, as there are some unintended consequences. We have some commitments from the members on the committee, the sponsor, and some others to continue that conversation. We're going to look to continue to improve that piece of legislation. So while nothing has passed yet, it is one that we are tracking very, very closely in terms of how it interacts from a city, village, township standpoint, and then how that interaction would then translate up to the county as we look to reconcile those roles. I can tell you both the municipal treasurers and the county treasurers are currently opposed to this along with MTA. And so we are working in concert to try to have our voice heard, which to date it has, and they've started to make some changes. We're hopeful that should this legislation move forward, they'll incorporate all of our thoughts on this and find a system that works.
Sure. All right, lots of nuance there, John. Thanks so much. Let's close this out with one final topic, Dave, and that is the oath of office deadlines, especially timely now as we head into the post-election period. And that, is once we get through the elections in a couple weeks. What should newly elected officials and our communities that support them know about the timing and requirements here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw Kathy's comment there too, asking about this. So, as of right now, what I would tell you is that municipalities should be working with their general counsel to see what they say in terms of whether or not their charters would conflict with that proposal to implementation language requiring for that 6 days following an election to account for those overseas ballots. Because right now, there has been no passage of the oath of office legislation that would mitigate that conflict. What I can tell you in terms of a status of that is that we are working closely with the sponsors. We have been in contact with House and Senate leadership as recent as Friday of last week, making sure that they understand the urgency of this moving into the election next week. The good thing is that if we can get these bills up in either the House or the Senate, they have already passed their own chambers unanimously. So there would not be that 5-day window that's constitutionally required for bills to lay over and stuff like that. So if they can get these bills up this week, we should be able to get that onto the governor's desk. That's not a promise. That's not a guarantee. That's something that we're pushing and working on to help mitigate that. But as of right now, it's status quo. There is no change. So definitely need to be consulting with your legal counsel on what the path forward is for that.
Thanks, Dave. Check with your legal counsel, and maybe we'll have some updates for you all in the near future on that. All right. Big thanks to our team. John, something to add?
I don't want to weigh in on that issue. I always find there's good opportunities to sort of give members a little bit of flavor of what's going on in Lansing. And generally speaking, we don't weigh into the politics of things.
Sure.
But right now there is a lot more at play in terms of why this isn't happening. And Dave had mentioned that they passed unanimously, and we're seeing this on several different things right now. And again, so how legislators respond to different things within their environment and policy things are beyond our control. But the one thing that we can control, and the one thing that I think we're going to continue to emphasize as a state and federal affairs team back to our members, which I'm going to do right now, is that your engagement in these scenarios and in these situations is critical. We don't know in this particular case how many elections are actually impacted by this in terms of what people are working through and how their charters align with that. It's really incumbent upon our members to make that known to their legislators so they understand they can raise that issue to leadership and hopefully push these things forward. But that voice ends up being critical in these scenarios and situations, which, quite frankly, from our perspective, we don't see changing here.
Right.
There are several other things that we're going to have to work on in the coming months around just simple stuff like sunset extensions on economic development tools and things like that, that as we get to crunch time, which is essentially here by all measures,
Right.
and at the end of October, and if there are sunsets, for the end of 2025, making sure that we are informing people of how important these are, how we utilize them, what they mean to our communities, and what those benefits are, is going to be really, really critical. There's just not a better way in which to do that right now, as we have to deal with some of the, politics, which is natural for our job, but ones that are really starting to impact what we do and how we do that, and our members' voice becomes critical in that. So I just like to reemphasize that. It's really helpful. We really appreciate everybody's willingness to weigh in. I know Mr. Globinski from Grand Rapids is on. He was the one that actually testified last week on the postmark legislation. That type of involvement and engagement is critical. So if there are things that you care about, want to talk to us about, and we can pass those messages along, we are happy to do that.
Absolutely. Thanks for that reminder, John. All right. Before we wrap up, a few quick reminders. As we've talked about, or if you've missed it and you've been living under a rock, it is election season. So if you have new council members joining after the November elections, or there are folks who need a refresher, registration is open now. It's open early for our newly elected officials training series. These are 3-hour sessions that give newly elected folks or seasoned officials looking for a refresher all they need to hit the ground running, the very basics. FOIA and the Open Meetings Act, a little local government 101, a little bit on municipal finance. We've got our first session kicking off Thursday, December 4th in Lansing at our Lansing Capital Office. We've got session 2 virtual Thursday, January 22nd in the evening from 5:30 to 9:15 p.m. And we have got a Saturday session, Saturday, February 7th, also virtual, 8:30 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. So 3 options for your newly elected officials to join us. That registration is open now, and this is a great way to get grounded in the fundamentals of local governments. They all count towards the Elected Officials Academy credit and help our newly elected officials get acclimated right after that election happens. I also want to give a quick shout out to our 2025 Women's Elected Leadership Intensive cohort on wrapping up their 6th session journey. This year's group of women leaders dug into everything from community engagement to budgeting and economic development. Huge thanks to all the participants, speakers, and partners who made it a success, and we can't wait to celebrate the cohort on stage at the League's Capital Conference in March when they receive their certificates of completion. In addition to that newly elected officials training series, we also have on-demand content that is available to you anytime, anywhere, right when you need it. We have courses at my.mml.org on topics like ethics, lobbying, public leadership, and local government finance that are different from the content that we provide in some of our other sessions. It's a perfect way to earn EOA credit or refresh your knowledge. Again, those are on demand. You can watch them anytime. You can log in at my.mml.org to see them all. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you on our next Live at the League on November 10th, hosted in Frankfurt. Have a great week.